I mean, that's what we're talking about.
That is a good one.
How are you?
Are you?
If you have not already signed in, please sign in up front. We also have agendas up front for you guys to look at. So please go grab an agenda before the meeting starts and sign in. There's also comment cards if you guys would like to leave any comments, questions that you have. They're up there.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
If anyone wants any, Randy is illustrating how to retrieve them. You just want one? Lisa, there is cookies and drinks if you would like any. I already told everyone else in here. The seats up front are reserved for board members, so the front row is board and planning commission, as well as that. We wanted you guys to have a front view.
snap it, make them home. Not me.
And that was Megan, she's amazing. She was great. Our amazing, what's your title, social media manager?
Yeah, what is your title?
Your title, whatever you do, you're amazing at it. Thank you for the cookies.
I am flabbergasted. Did you bake them? They're homemade. All of it's homemade.
Watch your nose, it's gonna grow.
She needs to start hosting these, honestly. Like, we have treats and drinks, and it's amazing. I'm surprised we don't have a liquor, honestly.
Does anybody want to eliminate tea?
Hey Jim, there are treats over there if you would like any. Please help yourself and sign in. Grab an agenda. Hey Chris, thank you for showing up. Hello, Administrator Gilbert.
I can't get used to that.
You are right over. Hey.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Rock. I was going to show her I had it the other day. Sorry, I'll get it. How are you doing?
Having way too much fun. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
I know, they should have. She was like, she was asking, she said, you probably can see all that. She was amazing.
How are you? What are you doing now? Oh. Not cutting hair? How are you so down? You're ready, there's that. Very hard. Well, I heard the news, not fun.
Yeah, I know, a lot of people were
There are refreshments over to the side if anyone would like to get some brownies.
Hey, how are you?
Hello, Katie. Your seats are reserved in the front row for planning commission and board. Please try to sit up there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's also some goodies and treats over here to the side after you guys sign in. Please be sure to grab those. We don't want them to go to waste.
I didn't hear it. I didn't see it.
Okay, we're about to get started. If you want to grab your drinks and any food before we get started, please start taking your seats. If you haven't already grabbed an agenda, please grab an agenda and sign in. Again, there's goodies over there. Please grab those before we get started. All right, 5:30, everyone. Let's do this thing. Okay, if you don't already know, I'm Megan Thomas. I'm Planner 1 with the City of Siloam. We also have several other city staff members here with us today to answer any questions that you guys may have throughout this presentation. So I'll start over here. We have Ben Rhodes, our senior planner. We also have Randall Clark, our building official, Kevin Moore, who is our interim community development director, as well as our city engineer. We have Wade Baker, who's our permit tech. Over here, we have Danny Farine, who's our water superintendent. We also have Johnny Bland, who's with electric. And then we have Dayton, who is a project engineer. So before we get started, since we have a limited amount of time for this meeting, I wanted to run through a couple of meeting rules with y'all. So just a couple of things to be aware of. Please hold all designated questions for the designated 10-minute Q&A sessions. Please be sure that your questions are related to the presentation that was just given or that designated Q&A time. If you have a question, we will bring a mic over to you. Wade will be the one that will be bringing that mic. Just Wade, raise your hand. And if we run out of time during that designated Q&A time, since they're only 10 minutes, we have comment cards over there on the table. Please fill those out with your email address and leave them in the box. Laura is holding it up so that you can take a look at that. We will get back to you through email with those responses. So with that said, let's get started. So this presentation is going to be broken up into two separate parts. The first part will be significant developments, and the second part will be preliminary and final plats. Each section will have its own Q&A session so that you guys can ask those questions. Again, please keep your questions related to the presentation that was just given. Okay, so what is a significant development? So there are a couple of factors that qualify a project as a significant development. The main thing we see is if it's 20,000 square feet in disturbed area or greater, or if it's 5,000 square feet in building floor area or greater, or if it's 4 or more dwelling units, that classifies it as a significant development project. So this is our flow process. It's a little confusing because there's a lot of steps to it. But over here to the left is the project type, and to the right you can see the review process for that project type. So you can see majority of our projects do undergo the tech review process. That's where staff gives comments. And then from there they go to planning commission, then board of directors, and then building permit review. So this is an example of an approved significant development. I'm sure we all know where this is at. Highway 412, IHOP, we all know. So one resource that we have to help our applicants as they come through the process is our development procedures manual. This manual gives a rundown of the process, the steps, the requirements. It gives you fees, contact information for the different departments, and it also gives you templates for legal notice. So this is a great resource that we have that we offer our applicants. A lot of surrounding cities do not offer this. We just want to put everything in one place
so that everyone can find it easier. A lot of cities depend on their code sections to lead their applicants, and we wanted to give it to them straightforward what you need to do. So this is our development calendar. So you can see it goes down from here, and that's how you read it along with the dates. So one thing that I love about our development calendar is that we actually go the extra mile, and we give information like when is the last day you can notify the newspaper before you miss your legal notice deadline. When will staff send you comments? These are extra stuff that other cities, I looked at other surrounding cities' calendars, they don't provide that information up front. You have to figure it out on your own. And so we take it the extra step, and we like to tell them everything that they need to do so they don't miss any deadlines. And this is a timetable, just so you guys can see what the time frame is. So from about 15 to 21 days following initial submittal of the project, we enter the tech review meeting. That's where we just go over comments for it. Planning Commission is about 40 to 44 days from initial submittal, and then Board of Directors is about 63 to 67 days. So altogether, a significant development takes maximum 67 days to get to the board approval part of it. And so pre-application meetings. So we have pre-application meetings, which is just an opportunity for the applicant to tell us a little about their proposal, and staff can give input and comments on that. The applicant can also ask questions, and this is where the project is introduced to us. We also have what we call discovery meetings, which are much more conceptual. They don't really have concept plans. It's just them really asking, what can I do with this property? And these are ways that we help the applicant figure out how they can utilize the property to the best of their ability. We also have pre-submittal meetings. So these are a little less conceptual than pre-application discovery meetings. At this point, this is right before they plan on submitting. They plan on submitting on the 1st. They have a plan in place. And we're just really giving final questions, comments that they can tidy up before they do an initial submittal, basically. So application submittal. I think this is Wade. I'll hand it over to Wade.
The application submittals, for the most part, as pointed out on the calendar, are for these type of projects are the first business day of each month. So that makes it fairly predictable to plan several months in advance for applicants and for ourselves. Are we doing this? Are we doing significant development and then going back through? All right. Well, this kind of serves both of those pretty well. Yeah. Thanks. Some of the smaller projects may not need all of these, but this gives you a pretty good idea of what our largest projects would require. So drainage report, traffic impact, things like that, those are required for this level of development and may not be required for smaller applications. Thank you. We talked about the step one that we always try to point applicants back to is the pre-application meeting. We have some developers who probably submit things almost monthly. So there might be some cases where smaller projects aren't going to necessarily need a pre-application meeting, but essentially anything at the significant development or the preliminary plat level definitely needs at least one discussion before people start filling out applications and sending us the exhibits. In the last year or so, well, actually in the last 18 months or so, we've created a brand new module within our software to handle this. It's more tailored towards planned developments, and that's enabled us to process payments and get more work on interface available online for contractors and things like that. The legal notification process can be a little daunting for individuals. But like those developers that come back to us, month after month, they're essentially experts, in this process. But when we have new applicants, they all, anybody that's in the development arena is going to be familiar with legal notice steps. They're different for each jurisdiction, each city. I would dare say I haven't seen an expansive scientific study, but I would say the legal notice philosophy of Siloam Springs is going out of our way to tell people. We have a mandated 3 layers of legal notice here. It's a physical sign, letters to property owners, and a newspaper ad. But we also took it upon ourselves in the last year or so to add another layer of this on the planning info website as well. So we've tied that nicely into our physical signs by adding a QR code that can be scanned, or it gives the website address where people can go and actually pull the plans up, the initial plans. That's an example of one of the, now this for the larger projects, you're not going to see the Siloam Springs signs out there. You're going to see the developer signs like a preliminary plat or a significant development. And then this has become an increasingly popular tool amongst developers. And this is on the city's GIS page. It's part of our general reference map. And there's a tool on there where applicants or their agents can go on and get the 300-foot notification buffer around each property. This example here is showing the library. So you can see how quickly in a semi-residential area, this is actually saying 56 addresses right here. So when we indicate this parcel, here it automatically goes out 300 feet in every direction and gets us that list of residents. So the commercial projects are probably going to have a shorter list because you've got a smaller number of owners, and in the residential area, 50 or 60 is not uncommon. Everybody that owns property within 300 feet of the subject property will receive a letter from the applicant letting them know when the public hearing is. That's nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Wade. So I think everybody knows who I am, but in case not, my name is Ben Rhodes. I'm the senior planner for Siloam Springs. And so like Megan, I do some of the planning reviews that we've covered so far today. So moving on with the significant development permitting process, we're at step 5 here, which starts the technical review process, which I'll cover. And this is really the meat of the staff review, where we really dig into a project and ensure that it's compliant with the city codes and procedures. This begins with the same time the applicant starts their legal notice, just to give you kind of an idea of the time you're thinking about biting. So on the right side of the screen, you see an example of the comments that are entered into our computer system called iWorks. And this is also has an interface to the public. They're given an ability to, or the applicants, I should say, are given an ability to log in and view comments. Each department represented member of tech review, some of which are sitting over there on the right, are given options to review the projects and provide their comments, as you see with the different departments listed out there. The comments are usually available to the applicant about a week or so after their initial submittal, and we try to have them compiled and ready the Monday prior to technical review. Technical review is always on a Wednesday, so it's always going on Mondays. And Megan does a wonderful job compiling that for our applicants and emailing those out so they have everything in one place for all the comments. Staff will internally discuss projects before comments go out, just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page with some stuff as these things proceed. So here you see some of the comments in the final form, and this is shown as a comment response letter that we require. This one happens to be for an LE electric project that was recently approved on Simon Sager. And you see there literally the comments that are listed out, and then the applicant's response in red. They just are acknowledging that they understand the comment in writing and that there's no questions about that. So here you see as an example of the checklists that we use to help generate our comments. So today's focus is going to be not really on our regulations per se, but more on our permitting review process. But that said, this is a peek into kind of what we're looking at for our projects. And this is straight from the Development Procedures Manual, which I'll call the DPM. So I use that acronym a lot. And so the applicant will be furnished with this same information you see on the screen prior to applying, so they know what are the different things that they need to have on those plans. It's not supposed to be a mystery or hieroglyphics. They would know ahead of time what we're looking for. So here you see more broadly staff's basis for the checklist requirements from the previous slides. So in addition to the DPM, we're looking at city code, which is the primary zoning, although there are other areas that we use, such as master street plan and the city's stormwater management and drainage manual, which you see all shown in those boxes. So the mechanism for each of these documents were all approved. And as Megan mentioned earlier, the DPM is the primary staff policy and procedures manual, and as such, we are at liberty to change these from time to time based off of the philosophy of improving the end user experience, as well as protecting the best interests of the city and its residents. City code is by ordinance, as well as the drainage manual, whereas the master street plan is approved by resolution. Ordinances are considered codified law, whereas resolutions, there's a board resolving to approve something, but it's not codified in law. This does not diminish or otherwise water down the authority of any matter approved by resolution. It's simply just a different vehicle to get to those approvals. So coming from the DPM, we're looking at items such as submittal requirements, like the comment response letter that you just saw, functional criteria such as does it have the correct map arrow, scale, that kind of thing. All those regulations are in the procedures manual, so that's where you would find that type of thing. Getting into the municipal code, we are looking more at the meat of the review items. This is coming out of chapters 53, 87, and 102, which is our landscaping, subdivision regulations, and zoning code. And we do use other departments, I should say rather, do use other chapters when reviewing. But for this presentation, we're going to focus primarily on the planning level review. Out of these chapters, we get the items that you see listed, bulleted below on the right side. Chapter 54, we are looking more at subjective criteria, such as does the project fit within the neighborhood context. And as such, we cover that in greater detail in the staff reports. And those of you that read those, these are the parts that are in the gray boxes in the staff report on each criteria. So when using the master street plan, we look for things like right-of-way dedications, calculation of street fees, and other regulations pertaining to traffic study. And finally, we are providing comments off of the drainage manual, which come from city engineering, which, as you can see, listed out in the bullets there. Going into the technical review meeting itself, these are held always usually on the second or third Wednesday of the month, and they're by appointment only. And that's done intentionally so that we're not allowing applicants to sit through 30, 40, 50 minutes of someone else's project before they get to their project. They just come in at their designated time, which we find works better. So the point of the meeting is not for us to give the applicant more information, it's for the applicant to dialogue back with us. They've already received all the comments, they've read them, this is a time for them to say, I don't agree with what you're saying here, or can we clarify this and that. So it's just a discussion, really, and so they understand what they're supposed to be doing. It's not just comments in writing, but it's comments verbally as well. So after that, they will get the comments about 48 hours ahead of the meeting, and then the applicant will have 1 week after tech review to do their final revisions to their plans to get to their second submittal. And so here with the second submittal, staff will review that for compliance. Once those are checked, we will maybe comment further that the comment was fully addressed correctly. But the important thing is that comments do close, and I want to emphasize that. So when comments close, what that means is that staff will no longer have at any point to provide new comments to the applicant. And that's important because it allows the applicant to know that they've received everything they're going to get, and now they just need to address what's there. So we're not going to be giving them lingering comments throughout the process, and then they have to keep going back and making changes to the plans later on. And then this step here, step 7, is looking just at a follow-up to step 4, which Ray was mentioning. We have the legal notification documents, and those are also very important because it's how we verify that all legal notice was done correctly, because we don't want to have something come before Planning Commission or City Board and someone not have received a letter, or it was the wrong date in the pad, or something about that. So we're checking everything, making sure legal notice is up to par, and then we will allow them to proceed to the review body. And I believe with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Megan. Megan?
Thank you. So once it makes it through the tech review process, that's when we start getting into the final submittal. So this is the final version of the plans that gets taken to the Planning Commission, and then it will be seen by the board later on. And these are the final approved plans that we stand at the end of the day. So once it gets to Planning Commission, staff will present the project to the Planning Commission for recommendation. We provide a detailed staff report with all the data and information that we have found. We present our recommendation to the Planning Commission, including any needed conditions of approval based on our review of the proposal. As practice, staff will make every effort to either add conditions or table the project before resorting to a flat-out denial. The Planning Commission will then decide to either recommend approval or deny the project based upon the findings of staff and any testimony that is received at the meeting by public. If they vote to recommend approval of the project, it will then be forwarded to the Board of Directors for review. In between the Planning Commission and the Board of Directors, these applicants do have the option to schedule a pre-construction meeting, go ahead and submit their construction plan so that they can get that process started. This step is important because it allows the applicant an opportunity to go ahead and get ahead of the process, because it takes about 2 weeks to review those plans. So this way, if they have submitted it, they can go ahead and have a building permit turned around the day following board if they choose to take this option. I will say most applicants do wait until after board to do their pre-con and submit their construction plans, but they do have it if they wanted to be and agree on it. So then it goes to board. So the board receives the same staff report that we gave to the Planning Commission, but they also receive a memo that breaks down basically what happened at the Planning Commission with the project, if there was any discussion, if any conditions were removed or added, any public comments. Those things are included in the memo so that the board can be aware of what happened. The board will receive the same presentation that we gave to the Planning Commission, at which time they will have discussion, public can give comments like they do at Planning Commission, and then they will either decide to vote to approve or deny the project based on the findings of public testimony, same as Planning Commission. So, say the board approves the project. From that point, authorization to proceed, I send them a approval letter that breaks down the status of their approval, any needed conditions prior to building permit issuance, and I also let them know the next steps that need to be taken so that they are aware of what they need to do from this point forward. And easement plat. So this might look a little confusing to y'all. You might recognize it more as our standard condition that we put on these significant developments, where we typically say that drainage or utility easements will be required via separate instrument prior to certificate of occupancy issuance. And that's where this easement plat comes in at. So we don't really know the exact locations of easements sometimes until it gets to C of O. Once they have those locations really pinned down, that's when they dedicate those and they come through with an easement plat to make sure that we know where we have things and what we need. And with that, that's the end of our significant development presentation. So I'll open up for Q&A. Wade will go around and give a mic to anyone who has questions, so please raise your hand if you have questions. Again, we have 10 minutes, so please keep your questions to the presentation that was just given on significant developments. And we can start. Anyone have any questions? Wade, can you take the mic over to that gentleman?
Probably won't need it, I talk pretty loud. Yeah, I'm Mike James, I'm a registered land surveyor and actually a Benton County surveyor. I've got a question about the easements that's bothered me for years. I've been told here that the reason on track splits and things, and I'm talking about small projects, not big, Walmart additions, but why they have to have an easement around the boundaries of all properties, and I've been told that it's so the city won't ever have to buy them if they ever need one, most of which are never ever needed. And now, if there's anything comes up in the future, it is a costly process to get them abandoned. And I would like to know why these easements that says if needed have to go on every lot split, and not just a lot split. I'm talking about if you've got 100 acres and you're going to cut it into two 50-acre tracts, and I've been told this by this board, that is a tract split or lot split and needs an easement all around the edges. I don't understand this. Could you answer that for me, please?
Kevin actually did not answer that question. Kevin?
I can take a stab at that and then maybe pass it over to someone from Water Services. We don't think Danny Farine. But essentially, it's just so that we have the ability to, when there are developments that are happening, they are splitting property off, and those properties are going to get developed sooner or later with new construction. And so the city wants to have the ability to extend lines to these new constructions and not have to go through the process of establishing easements after the fact, because they can be shown and approved on the plat itself. That's the opportunity for doing that. Now, as to why we need them along perimeter, I would like to hand it over to Danny for further questions on that.
All right, a lot of times we ask for those perimeter easements on development because there's a lot of utilities out between the water, the sewer, phone, cable. You got a lot of utilities. If we all put them all in the front yard or along where it's easy and convenient, then ultimately if we have to add additional lines on the property, the city's going to be paying for those easements down the road to those homeowners. Or to the property owners, and that adds a cost to our ratepayers ultimately. We're trying to maintain our cost for our ratepayers down by asking for those easements up front. It's something we're providing a service, and we ask for those perimeter easements to be able to do that.
It's not sometimes, it's all the time. And it's nothing less than, in my opinion, extortion. You either give them the easement that they're probably never going to use, or they won't approve your project. And this is not me personally. I'm just a surveyor that's working for hundreds of other people in the area. And I just don't understand it. I think it's wrong, and it's just, the city is holding everybody hostage, making them do these unnecessary easements. And I'm not talking about in subdivision flats, they're gonna have dedicated easements and setbacks on every lot anyway, and that's necessary. I'm in favor of that. But the thing is this, if I want to put a subdivision in, which we're doing one personally, up around Gentry, we have to buy an easement from SWEPCO, who's one of our neighbors, to get to it. We haven't forced them to give us one in doing something in the past. And that's fair. We shouldn't have to, if a guy wants to make a subdivision, why should he have a right to come across his neighbor's property without compensating him for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's, the ratepayers or the developers? So they just might have to have some cost in there on getting these extensions done, or being able to leave the available room for all the utilities to fit into.
And one last thing, and I'll shut up. It says here that the, track split, a lot split, a lot recombination could be done in 26 or 27 days. There's no way that ever happens because these easements that we're requiring has to go to the, I don't know, the board. Yeah, for approval. And this sometimes, I've had them take as long as 3 months or longer to get approved for a simple lot split. And it hurts the realtors, it hurts the people who are trying to sell their property and move on. It's not beneficial to the public. And I promise I'll shut up shortly.
I would pull up the minor amendments calendar to see when it go to the board, but unfortunately it's not in this presentation. But we can look into that. The minor amendments calendar is set up. We have it set as tight as we can do to get staff comments in. We've looked at that calendar several times trying to make it work with the board accepting easements and staff doing comments and everything. And we pretty much squeezed it as tight as we could between submittals and comments, giving people enough time to collect those comments and giving you all enough time to provide your revised survey. So, but I appreciate your comment and we'll look at it. Anyone else have any questions? Jim?
The agenda, I was a bit confused on the meeting tonight. My mistake, I thought this was going to be a public forum for feedback on the survey. So I noticed on item 8, development survey results, and then that last item is the board, and so the public won't have input in that.
No, the board and planning commission can ask questions on it. The public input is the survey results itself. That's where y'all chimed in at. That's where you guys gave your opinion and your comments. And now we leave that 10 minutes because we're so tight on time for the board and planning commission to ask questions on the comments that you guys have already given. And give y'all about 2 to 3 weeks.
We did give about 2 to 3 weeks for y'all to fill out that survey, and I sent out several reminders so that everyone can get their comments in. But that's why I sent out so many reminders, is because I really wanted you guys to provide your input, because we were going to be so limited on time for the board to ask the questions.
Sure. Well, since the boards, will there be an opportunity for public hearing where the public could weigh in on the survey and the comments? Is that something else that we would whether it's not?
We can look into that if that's something
If that's something the board and planning commission would be interested in, something we can look into, but we can look into that. Anyone else? Nobody else has any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. So we're going to move on to preliminary plats. So these were the second set of permits that we were going to cover tonight. And I understand there are many other types of applications, lot splits and all that. We just didn't have time to cover everything that we do. So we just really focused on these 2 types of applications for your consideration. Just for unveiling, if you will, kind of what the process is for these types of applications. So a preliminary plat. So what is a preliminary plat? A preliminary plat, by definition, is a plat drawing used to show proposed subdivision, sufficient to show the layout and design of all aspects, but not necessarily in its final form recording. And here, land starts as a larger tract, a lot, and then the preliminary plat, as you see here, proposes streets and other infrastructures to allow for a larger piece of land to be subdivided into smaller lots, where you get, that's where you get the word subdivision, actually. So in most cases, these are for residential use, as you see here. However, they can be commercial or industrial subdivisions. A good example of that would be the South Point addition off of South Lincoln Street. So, preliminary plat application mirrors that of significant development permit with some very minor variances between the two different reviews. In summary, just for steps 1 to 3, we're looking at the pre-application meeting, which we just covered, and the significant development. I would like to emphasize that we do encourage applicants to reach out to their neighbors before applying so they can work out any neighborhood issues that are specific to the neighborhood, such as if there's a traffic problem. We found that neighborhood meeting streamlines comments at the Planning Commission and board and allows for more of an informal dialogue between the developer and the neighbors. This is done all before the process begins, so we can get some of those issues addressed. Formal application is done same day as significant development permits, so the applications can be pulled together into the technical committee packet, thus streamlining the review process. The submittal may include a few additional items, such as a traffic study if needed, for a thorough review. And looking at steps 4 through 8, we didn't want to go through a slide for every single step just because this mirrors so closely with what you just looked at, so we're summarizing here. But as I said, this follow along pretty much with significant development. Legal notice remains identical to SCP process, and those are also done by the applicant. The staff technical review includes zoning, but we do focus a little bit more on the master street plan and of course the subdivision regulations, as these come in a bit more into play for the subdivision review itself. And finally, the Planning Commission does receive the preliminary plat and provides a recommendation based off staff's finding on the criteria used for approval of permits. Like significant developments, these will be forwarded to the board for approval, and then they approve, they will be able to start construction of the development. I now would like to pass the floor over to Mr. Kevin Moore, City Engineer, so he can cover the final planning process. Kevin?
Thank you, Ben. Kevin Moore, City Engineer. So looking at a final plat, typically towards the end of the process, all the public infrastructure is installed. At this point when you're looking at it, it can be done in phases. And that's up to the applicant. Typically in the preliminary plat, they'll determine how many phases they want to break something into. So when we're looking at a final plat, we're really looking at finalizing the preliminary plat that you've already reviewed and accepted as a board. So typically the concept hasn't really changed. You're accepting the easements and formally subdividing the property when you accept the final plat. So all public improvements are either completed or covered under performance bonds so that the city does not have to expend any public money if something were to fail to be completed. So looking at the approval process, we have two separate processes, one for final plats that are identical to what initially came through and one for plats that have changed. These can be things like shifting lot lines or the relocation of utilities, something that drives a large enough change that needs to be looked at again, particularly if the density has changed, if lots have gotten larger or smaller, that will automatically trigger the full process again. So if there have been changes, it goes through Planning Commission and board again. If there have been no changes, then it can go directly to the board for their review and acceptance. So if it does go directly to the board, then the Planning Commission is informed that it's been approved approved and is going to the board, similar to easements and lot splits. Any layout changes have to be re-reviewed again through the whole process through technical review and the board. So again, the board's not reviewing the design once it comes through as a final plat, because that has all been done with the preliminary plat. That's why we get the drainage reports, grading plans, things like that up front. Some of that does change with actual construction documents, but it's typically not an actual change to the plan and the lot layout itself. So once it has been accepted, it goes through title verification and is then recorded with the county. And we typically require this to be done within 45 days. As part of that process as well, we get surveyed as-built of all the utility mains so that we know that things are in the easements that they're supposed to be in for future access, things like that. They're also verifying the pond volume to make sure that it functions as designed, functions as intended before we take it over. The city will take over most residential ponds unless there's a property owners association involved, and then commercial ponds are expected to be taken care of by the commercial landowner. So this also tracks any changes during construction for us. So a good example of this process kind of as a whole is the Foxtail subdivision. So along the northwest side, you can see some areas that were delineated as wetlands, and so they were not able to disturb the majority of this northwest corner, so that's why you see such nod shape to the pond itself. You'll also notice on Waukesha Road, it bends over on the southwest corner to line up with the extension to the south. So we've gotten right away and planning for future extension of that road and for Porter Road as well. So what we really see with this, going to the board, you'll see the preliminary plat, and then we'll see construction plan sets separately. And so kind of looking at an overview of the site, we're looking at things like what lines up with our master street plan, our master sidewalk plan. So for this project, they put in a 10-foot side path along the north side because that's one of the areas that we had determined would benefit from a side path in our future plans. Wood fence around the wet detention for added safety whenever there's not a dry detention basin there required to be fenced. Again, the wetland area remaining undisturbed, and this is maintained by a property owners association for the Foxtail subdivision, and then the right-of-way and easements being dedicated as part of that project. So looking at an overview sheet, we have electric, typically in red, storm in purple, water and sanitary in blue and green. So a couple things to draw attention to: the clouds that you see kind of at the bottom right and then along the top, they're tracking revisions for us during our process. So some of these plan sets can get pretty large, occasionally over 100 pages, and so any change that happens, we really need our eye drawn to so that we can still keep our review timelines. So we're typically looking at a high-level review during the actual preliminary plat process, and then separate construction plans afterwards. So we're trying to catch anything that's kind of like a red light or that would drive a major change later that would hold up future development on that property. Some of the things that we look at are grading and drainage. We have maximum slopes for helping things to be mowable, as well as trying to prevent erosion. Minimum slopes as well, so that some of our drainage systems are self-cleaning. And then the grading plans extend into the lots so that individual house pads have water flowing away from them. We have a plan for what that's supposed to look like. So, and then they'll also include the immediate surroundings of the property and their contours as well to make sure, so that we can see how well it's matching the land around it. So street plans are a really good indication of the difficulties that we're going to deal with. So typically when things are really flat, the site is under some drainage constraints and some utility constraints. Sometimes there's rocks, sometimes there's just nowhere for the water to go. But we're really looking at details for the intersection. We have requirements in our master street plan for curves, both vertically and horizontally along the road. and then utility crossings being shown throughout the plan set. So drilling into storm sewer plans, they'll show gravel beneath the streets, which is something we require so that those trenches don't settle. We also are given capacity information that we need to make sure that things are sized properly, riprap to prevent erosion at outlets, and then again, like through the sizing, so we want to make sure for anything, we have two separate storm standards. We have the minor storm, which is 10 years, and then the major storm is 100 years. And so we're looking at containing the 10-year storm well within the pipe, so only 80% of its capacity, so there's extra capacity there. And then looking at the 100-year, typically being a foot below the opening so that it's not spilling out into the road. Here you can also see the pond. They're proposing about a 30% difference in that bottom left table between the water that left the site beforehand and the water that left the site after development. This is a good example because just to the north of this, we have a really flat area with some commercial buildings that flooded regularly before this project, and so they over-detained to give us that 30% reduction and help improve that area. So sanitary sewer plans are kind of unique. So typically, if there's a lift station, then things are complicated, but other than that, it's everything flows downhill. We do not have bins in our lines. Any bin in a storm line or a sanitary line has to be out of structure, out of manhole. By contrast, water lines can have bins as you need them, either to go over or under another utility or around curbs without affecting the capacity of the water line too much. So there are also 18-inch requirements within 10 feet of the sewer line to make sure that there's no bleed and contamination from one into the other. This is, again, Foxtail is a really good example because if you go out there today, phase 1 is mostly complete, and phase 2 we have accepted as a city, but there's still building homes on. So I would encourage you to go out and look at that project. And then I'd like to turn it over to Brandon and discuss home building.
All right, mine's pretty simple. Once you get like on a significant development project, you get that approved and get your pre-construction done, then at any time you can submit building plans for review. That is for your building, of course, vertical construction, significant development projects, permits, and preliminary plats, final plats. Those are the big picture of the full site. The only thing that you have that we look at on those, that would just have individual building footprints drawn on them. And then we'll have the type of construction that those are, so we know if it needs fire protection or not on commercial buildings. So at that point, you know, that doesn't include your building. You need a building permit for that. So those plans are provided. We try to give a turnaround for residential construction at the most a week. We try 2 to 4 days on that. For significant development or commercial projects, we have a maximum time of about 2 weeks review. That lets myself, fire marshal, engineer review those building plans, make sure they're up to code with our current adopted codes. We provide a letter to the applicant saying that your plans were approved. At that time, they can go ahead and get their building permit issued to them. Sometimes during like a significant development commercial project, you know, a builder's able to send his actual building structure plans in ahead of time and get that building plan done ahead of time, as I think Megan mentioned earlier. That way they can get that review approved by us. The building itself is approved by code, so that they can send those out to the contractors that they may be subbing out, so they can get their final prices in and their construction costs done. At that point, then the builder can come and actually have their contractor that they hire ask for a building permit for us. We issue building permits to homeowners, to property owners, and Arkansas
So this is, apologize, this is a wall of text, as I call that. But we want to try to fit this all on my slide here, just to show you. We just covered the entire process for 2 types of major applications for you. So I imagine it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. There's a lot of information there. We wanted to have one moment just to look at things that we have done to tweak the process, to try to improve the end experience and make things expedited, better for the developers, homeowners, the surveyors, everyone involved in the development process, to try to just make it more efficient, you know. And so I just want to cover some of these things. Reduced number of paper copies required. We have gone virtually 100% paperless at this point. The only thing that we require paper for is the final plat that has to be signed by the applicant and filed, because just practically with the need for people to sign these things, it's just not practical to have them as PDFs. And so at one time, we required 15 paper copies of everything going to tech review, and they had to be sent out in individual mailboxes. That's what happened when I started at the city, and so we've gone from 15 paper copies to 0 when you apply. We removed the requirement for a planning commission and board of directors to sign off on the plans themselves. So this is more applicable to the PDFs, or say the large-scale development plans, so like significant developments, and even the preliminary plats that we just covered. At one time, I think even a year ago, we still required those to be printed out, and we have the signature blocks that everybody had to sign. Because we have the resolution that authorizes the approval of both significant development and preliminary plat, having the signature on the plans themselves is sort of redundant. And so we said, well, we'll go ahead and make that as a PDF as well. And our permit tech actually adds the resolution numbers and signatures in our electronic files, so that's less paper as well for that. We created staff level review for lot splits. At one time, it has reduced the process by 6 to 7 weeks. One time, all lot splits, no matter what, or even lot consolidations had to go to the planning commission, no matter what, and they had to do legal notice. And so that was automatically adding 5 weeks under the project because it takes about 5 weeks, well actually like 6 weeks to get on the planning commission. So by eliminating that and allowing staff level approval, that does speed it up. The easements do still have to go to the city board for acceptance, but we have eliminated a review process in here by trusting staff to be able to approve lot splits. However, we do inform the planning commission at every meeting which lot splits we've approved. In case there's any questions, we have that opportunity for them to ask us if they think we've gone awry approving something that doesn't look correct. We allow final plats that are identical to preliminary plats to bypass planning commission, go directly to the board. That also saves a considerable amount of time, speeding up the review process. We have removed the lender subordination requirement from plats to speed up the process. At the end of the stage, when we have title verification, but if there had been a loan or a mortgage on the property, we had to get the lender to actually, like Arvest Bank, to sign off on that. After hearing some feedback from some lending institutions, realized that was somewhat of a redundant requirement, and so that has been removed. There are other cities that don't require that, so there's no reason why we need to, so we went ahead and took that off. We are removing the quality of our public notice signs. There used to be these beat up metal signs that have the red text. Some of you guys might remember that. Those are long gone. Now we have bigger signs that have QR codes. So I think Wade mentioned earlier our planning info webpage. So be aware of that as soon as any application gets turned into the city, we immediately put it up on the website. So it's not a secret to the public what we're looking at. And so the signs that you see, the QR code will take you to planning info. So any of you on the board of planning commission or anyone else, you can get a sneak peek of what we're looking at months in advance, because we are putting that all out on the web for anyone to review. And then we created a more detailed, updated calendar for all the meeting dates. When I first started, it was really like one page with like 3 dates on it. Now we have the full list of all the dates that people need to know in the due process. And then we have just recently done approval letters. This is Megan's idea. She gets 100% credit for that. So what approval letter is after it gets approved by the city board, we do send out a letter to the applicant reminding them that it's been approved and giving them all these steps to get to proceed with the project, including all those conditions, which are very important. A lot of times there are different conditions that they have to do before they get to their final building permit. And lastly, we've expedited the review of legal notices for lot splits to allow those to happen prior to submittal, so like a pre-submittal review. And the reason for that is how our code reads is that with a lot split, you have to do notice within 10 days of the application. And so if you wait to the very end of that process, people that receive letters really won't have a whole lot of time to respond. So we want to get those letters out as soon as possible. So by expediting that allows that process to happen longer. And I believe that is
I just wanted to add on to Ben talking about us expediting the review on legal notice for lot splits. We also created the minor amendments calendar this year, which we didn't have before for lot splits and these incidental reviews. Before it was kind of just, we had to make up the dates as we go for when you'll get your comments, when you can submit your second thing, and that kind of dragged out this process to where it wasn't efficient and it was kind of spread out more. So over the last year, we did create a minor amendment calendar, which offers 2 submittal options throughout the month for incidental reviews, and it also tightens up those time frames for comments and everything to make sure these projects are getting done as quickly as possible without being held up for months at a time. So I just wanted to add that in since that wasn't on this list for some reason. Oh, and that opens our Q&A session. Before we get into this Q&A, I just want to, Jim, you had a question at the last one. We are going to open it up to the public for questions and comments on the survey results when we get to that portion of the Q&A. But just so you can be aware, and anyone else who wants to stick around for that, we'll open it up for y'all. It just might end up going over the 7 o'clock time, but if you guys are fine with that, then we'll open it up to everyone. So, but we'll start with this Q&A for preliminary and final plats. Any questions? Oh, wait, can you take the microphone over to the gentleman?
Yeah, no, I talk too much. Two questions and a comment. The comment is planning and inspection, and the building people have always been great to work with, because I bring them some weird ones. They know me. On the final plat, just so I understand this, it's not approved until all the roads are in, all the sewage drainage is completed, and then the contractor can go vertical?
You have to turn off your microphone.
You can just talk, I think. Sorry. So they have the option to final plat early with a performance bond to cover the remaining improvements that have been installed at the time. They also have the option to build, I believe it's 1 model home permit for every 25 lots. And so there are some cases where they can start going vertical for a model home specifically before the final plat goes through. And it is a separate permit. They can't just use it to sell an early lot once it's
Okay, so they bond everything that hasn't been completed then?
Yes, they would bond anything that's not completed for final.
Okay. And maybe this other question is not for this time, I don't know. If you had a alleyway between 2 lots and you want to get it abandoned, do both homeowners, can one homeowner initiate that, or do both have to be in agreement, or
ready to get it abandoned.
Is this working? Yes. Oh, good. Any homeowner can initiate the process, but both homeowners have to agree to it. So if you have an alleyway and the other homeowner is not willing to sign or unavailable, then it cannot proceed forward. You have to have both to agree.
Are there any other questions on this? Okay, wait. You guys, I have two microphones going at once, so.
On your title verifications on your plats, we are required to put the deed reference as well, and then we have to have the owner have notarized signature go on the plat. Then we add the title company at an extra fee of $250, say that this is their property. That's kind of redundant in itself as well. I just want to kind of add that comment to it.
So, I should have started this down. So, on the survey results, since we're allowing the public to comment on them, thank you. Since we're allowing the public to ask questions and give comments at the end of the survey result presentation, that is part of the presentation for the survey results. That was a comment that came up frequently, and so that's something that I anticipate us to talk about with that Q&A session. So, if you want to hold it, thank you. Anyone else on preliminary and final plats before we jump into the survey results? I know everyone's excited for survey. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, I'm gonna jump into the survey results and let us get that presentation up real quick. It's a different one. Thank you, Ben. Okay. Okay, as many of you guys know, we sent out a survey to all of our applicants that have submitted applications within the last 2 years. We did not go past 2 years, mainly just because some codes have changed since then, some procedures have changed since then, and so we felt like the most relevant information we could get was based on those applicants who have come through recently. And so this is the presentation on those results. Please note, this is not a comprehensive presentation. I did not lay out every single comment that we received. This is really it's really just what we received the most comments of, and what I saw frequently come through. So, but board members did receive a copy of all the comments that came through. So just be aware. Okay. So we asked, I think it was 11 or 12 questions that we asked. The first question that we asked was, please rate your experience working with the City of Siloam Springs community development staff. So the staff here at Siloam Springs got a 3.89 stars out of 5 stars. I felt like that was pretty good for me. Okay, and then the second one was on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the slowest and 10 being the quickest. Please rate in comparison with other cities the time it takes to receive a planning permit from Siloam Springs. So this is time frame. We were at 6, so that's out of 10. So we kind of fell in the middle, but we were on the higher end of the middle for the time it takes to get through our process in comparison to other cities. So they're on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least stringent and 10 being the most stringent. How would you rate Siloam Springs code and application requirements compared to other cities that you have worked with? And so we got a 6.94, 10 is the most stringent. So we're on the higher end of that, but we're still kind of in the middle there, but higher, you're about to hit that. So our codes come off as a little stringent to some applicants. And then, so we asked them to explain their rating that they gave on our codes, why they felt that it was a 6.94 rating for stringent, and these were some of the responses that we received on that. So first, title company sign off. That was a big one. I had several responses that said title company sign off, and that is something that we have heard over the last year or so. Probably longer than that, but I've been here for a year. So that's a big comment. The other thing that I got several comments on was the approved plan changes to the 10% rule. So what that is if they change a plan greater than 10%, it has to go back through planning commission and go through the whole process again. And the code reads as any measurable variable. So that's one of the comments. And then requiring board review for all projects. I got this one multiple times as well. A lot of applicants were saying that it was creating a more time-consuming process, having both bodies review the project. And then easement requirements, which we've heard about already tonight, but that is also a frequent comment that we got. So again, this is not every comment that we receive, but this is the most that we got about constructive criticism, and these were frequent flyer comments. So, and then we asked, generally speaking, what do you find that's currently working well when submitting and undergoing the development permit process in Siloam? So these are good responses. So we got the email online ease of submitting applications. The team is always super helpful and quick to respond. Thank you guys. The codes are easy to understand and readable. Staff is very friendly and eager to help developers. The new minor amendments calendar makes these projects go by faster. That's why I added that to the list or not. Early final plat is huge. That's what Ben was talking about. Staff is great and keeps you up to date on changes that need to be addressed. Response time when we have a question, we usually receive an answer within half a day. And staff is easy to work with and the process is easy to follow. So that's what is working well currently. Then we said, what do you feel could use some improvement within the development permit approval process? Again, we see easement requirements coming up. Again, project approval duration, requiring projects to go to the board of directors. Title companies sign off on requirements. Efficient portal access. We have heard a lot of complaints on our portal, but we are working towards possibly getting it better, just so everyone's aware. And then public hearing notifications has a lot of steps versus other cities. And what that is your legal notifications that we talk about, how we require significant developments to do newspaper, neighbor notifications, and sign. So then we said on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being unlikely and 10 being very likely, how likely are you to recommend Siloam Springs to other contractors, developers, or builders? We got a 6.83 rating, so that's pretty good. That's out of 10. 10 was most likely, so we are being recommended. And then we asked, what is your main reason for that rating that they just gave on why they would recommend? So this is going to be a mixture of some responses. So first we have, it's much more efficient than most other cities in NWA. Then we got, Siloam is difficult to work with, often makes unreasonable requirements. And they went into a whole paragraph on easement dedications, but I just didn't have enough room on this slide. So easement dedications, that's a thing that we talked about. Easy to work with, seem to want development within city limits. Siloam is extremely slow and difficult in the approval process. So many of the NWA cities are extremely difficult to deal with, bordering unreasonable. Siloam staff are reasonable and work with applicants to find solutions. Appreciate that. City staff is easy to get a hold of with any questions or issues. The online portal, again, was an issue. Friendly and helpful staff. I continue to work for several builders that no longer want to build in Siloam Springs because of planning permitting process. And I would urge developers to not avoid Siloam's planning due to the process because it is much more complicated in other municipalities. So that was the reasonings behind why they would or would not recommend us to other developers, builders, or contractors. So we asked them to leave any final comments that they may have. So first, we have the only negative comments I have about Siloam is having to wait for planning commission for board of directors before we start a project. The Siloam Springs planners are knowledgeable, realistic, and solution-oriented. All in all, the city is great to work with, just some minor code updates needed. We often refuse to do work that will go through Siloam Springs Planning Department. It is just not worth it to have a simple track split track on for months. When I need to go into the city hall, they help out right away with anything I need and communicate back at a decent time. Change the culture. presentation. I will open it up to a Q&A. I don't have any specific words on it to this Q&A. Originally, it was just going to be Board and Planning Commission, but whoever wants to raise their hand, go ahead. Jim?
Yeah, the lights, and could I be so bold as to ask the podium, since we're not a public, anyway, yeah, I sort of misunderstood what the whole thing was about, but I'm glad to have the chance to address the board and the planning board as well. Follow up from that. I'm Jim Caldwell, live at 609 South Oak Hill. I've lived in Siloam Springs for over 40 years. Raised 4 kids here, now I've got grandkids here. This is my town, and I appreciate it very much. I think I bring a unique perspective to this discussion as far as the planning process. As a surveyor here in this town, I've done over 150 projects for the city of Siloam. And as we met with the staff here a few months ago, I'm on your side, I'm on your team, but also bring a perspective that I work for as many or more private citizens who are trying to navigate this process in the City Hall. So I see it on both sides of the table. And so that's what I'm going to share tonight with you. And excuse me for, I've got a handout. I'm passing out to the board. Yeah, to help me keep on track. Maybe it's a teacher in me. But just in this year, I've navigated over 14 lot splits, minor plats going through the city for private individuals, along with a number of the surveyor record on many of the large-scale developments going through too. So I by far have probably most of the stuff going through the city. And I've seen a lot. I've been here a long time. And most of these private citizens are not large developers that have a lot of money that can millions of dollars in development. There are people, as we mentioned earlier, that are trying to adjust a lot line, fix a battery with a neighbor, do whatever. And those are the kind of folks I'm working with to try to navigate this process. So I bring with that. All that said, these 6 recommendations that I've given you to consider moving forward, these aren't new. We've had planning development input for a long, long time. And I think I remember years ago in this room, for instance, getting input every 5 years, we do a cycle to get input. In April 21, I met with the former city administrator, got deed transfers and a few other things. The next month in May, I met with the former community development director, engineer Ben as well. In June, the next month, I requested to meet with the city attorney, but was denied. And then in July 21, I met again with the former community development director. And after this particular meeting, I was told that we're going to make some effort to try to address issues 1 and 2. More recently, I was invited in again April 25th. Most of the folks at this table as well shared a lot of these same ideas. So anyway, let me run quickly through these 6 items. Remove the title certification block. It took us 6 years to get the Leonard block removed from the plat. I told them from day one that it was not a good idea to get it in the plat. It took years and years and years, kept telling, didn't go to the board, it just kept working with the staff to try to get this off. And finally, called the state surveyor. He said, I've never seen this in any other jurisdiction in the state, as well as the title certification and the Leonard block. Anyway, so that got the ball rolling. Finally in June, we got that removed. Takes a lot of time and money to do that. The second thing, remove the requirement from having the board of directors accept every easement on the plat. Again, I'm talking about lot splits, lot line adjustment, not talking about large scale developments. Okay, they got to go to the board anyway. I'm talking about these dozens and dozens of jobs they do for private citizens trying to just clean up a lot line. If you feel like it's still required by law to have the board have it in the minutes, then do it every 6 months as a list up. We should not be holding up every plat for 2 to 3 weeks to have these guys file a plat when it's already been approved by the city staff. The cumulative delay on that is years of delay. Third one is rework the iWorks portal. We've already talked about that. Megan does a good job of putting that in an email and getting it out to us so we can address it. So I'm glad to hear that's going. Number 4, require that the staff follow the same checklists that are published for design professionals and contractors to follow. This came out after our April meeting, and I was talking with Megan, trying to address one of the comments on the letter, and I had the checklist in front of me, and I said, I'm just not seeing this, what am I missing? There's the staff have a sort of added items in their checklist that we don't see. So again, my recommendation to the board, moving forward, we need to have those the same. So that those of us out here in the public, when we're doing a project for somebody, we can see what those are. And I've got a list of what those differences are if you care to see that later. Number 5, recommend that private owners and developers be allowed to follow the same rules that the city follows. Now, let me give you some examples of this. Earlier this year, I did a lots consolidation survey for somebody on South Mount Olive between Tulsa and 412, small commercial lot. They were required to dedicate 10 foot of their land along Mount Olive because the master street plan designates that as a minor arterial. It needs to be 78 to 100 foot wide. It's currently at 60 foot. On the back of your handout, I've got the master street plan that kind of shows what those areas are. Anyway, the Mount Olive, I don't think, is on our long-range plan to be improved anytime soon. That curb and gutter, 20 years ago, it's a great street, 3 lanes. I don't think in any of our lifetime that's ever going to be on the plan. So to require a client dedicate another 10 feet seems unreasonable. And the reason that really struck me is that the city's doing work was widening and improving Kenwood Street right near there and not getting any extra right-of-way. And so I think there's a different standard that the people in the public working for than the city projects are doing. Another client of mine had a pre-application plat a couple years ago to split off 2 acres off their 100 acres. It's just on the south edge of town, but it's within the planning district. So the city had control. They did a preliminary just to see if they could split off 2 acres. In that process, I was told that, well, they're going to have to dedicate 3/4 of a mile by 35 feet of a potential future arterial street. And that amounted to 3.5 acres they were going to have to dedicate to the city. And again, my client backed up and said, well, split off 2, but give up 3, so they backed up and didn't go forward. And again, my main point is to be consistent. When the city does work and when private individuals try to do work, when we did Simon Sager Street, worked on that. That's the right-of-way width, that's good, it's a new street. But again, the work we're doing for Villaview, most of that right-of-way is 45 to 50 foot wide, and we're cramming that street in there, and a sidewalk on one side, and yet, if a private developer wanted to do that, they would have been under a whole different jurisdiction. I also added something in there about tolerances for developers, and curb and gutter. Put a lot of stakes in the ground in the city for many years. So I sort of got my hands dirty from that, done a lot of work, but I've worked on a number of developments recently where pavement's all in, they're almost done, and I go back and there's a pile of cut up curb and sidewalk, it's all piled up, cut up, and redone. It didn't meet the tolerance for ADA or the drainage. And here's the deal, my question is not to second guess whether those didn't meet the exact ADA schools or not. My comment though for the board and whatnot is that I go right out here because I put all the stakes in for this amphitheater job many years ago as well. It's a great project. But there's a couple places out there too that are more than the 1 in 12 ADA. And my point's exactly this. I wouldn't tear it out either. Because I don't think anybody's even noticed, and I don't think, it's gotten by, even though there's just some sections in there that don't quite meet code. So my point is when we look at the responses and the survey of people that aren't building here anymore, some of them are gone because of some of these kind of issues. And that happened on three last subdivision, there was piles of stuff that had to be cut out. And again, it may have been out of the tolerance, I don't doubt that. But we've got to use some common sense, and I think if we went out to some Kenwood project and other projects, there may be some issues there too. Finally, number 6, eliminate the requirement for constructing new sidewalks along public right-of-ways on all projects that require a building permit. Been here a long time in this city, and I was back when Holmeyer was engineer long before he ever came back in private practice, and he helped draft a lot of these ordinances. And my understanding, the intent of that was for new subdivisions. When you build a new subdivision, all the home builders need to build a sidewalk in front of their lot. That was never intended to apply to somebody that wants to put an addition on their house in the old part of town, or build a new house in a vacant lot. It was never the intention there. And why we continue to build these little sidewalks to nowhere scattered all over town, or find them, pay in lieu of. So that, again, that can be cleared up with interpretation of code, not overhauling the code and all that. It's just how we look at the code. Can we make this project work with the way it's written, or can we not make it work? And so that's what I, also related to sidewalk, like I said, I just finished the survey for the fire station expansion. That was the last job I just turned in for the city staff. And there's 1,350 feet of roadage along that Fire Station 1 between Parkland and Lincoln Street. And I just posed a question, are we going to require sidewalks on that city job? And my gut feel, I don't think we need to. I don't think there needs to be a sidewalk there, but my point is, fairly confident if that was a private party that took that plan through city right now, they'd be paying in lieu of building 1,300 feet of sidewalk, and I just think we need to regroup on that. So anyway, for the board and the planning board, any questions on those 6 items or any pushback you want to give as board of directors? I know somebody named. And is our city administrator here? Oh, okay. Haven't met you yet. Welcome. Anyway, any questions on the handout? There's a quiz afterwards too. Any questions, comments? Pushbacks? Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for the time and effort you put into this and all the
Yeah, it's been a fair amount of time. Non-billable hours, we call that in the business. But it's important. I live here. And the other thing is I work regularly with Danny Green, Dennis Kimby, Dustin Kenneth, Michael Blanket, Johnny Glenn, regularly. City's got great staff. We actually have great staff that do hard work and do great work. Like I said, the city, the street crew, build a great street. There's some things here that can be fixed. And I think really well. And I've been gracious for the last 8 years trying to work within the staff. Like I said, I got a long list of times I've met with these things. This title certification thing, all it does, read it, it's on the back of your hammer. You know what, all that does is the title company says who has the name on the last deed. It's not insuring the title. That's done, title companies do that with title insurance, not on the plat. So just like the letter block, that needs to be out there tomorrow. And stop this. When the day that got on there, I told them, this doesn't go on the plat. It's like the land block, it took 6 years to get that back off. So please, let's make this work. Again, for the common people. And again, I do as much work with the engineers and all these big jobs. I know what that is, but quit confusing a large-scale development with our neighbors that are trying to fix their fence with their neighbor or move a line, whatever. Let's move that on. It's not trying to break the rules. We're just trying to use some common sense and reason. Go from there. Any other questions? Yeah.
You work in other communities in the area. How often do they, is it different the process?
He's asking what are the comparisons with other jurisdictions, and I think it's exactly the same thing that we found when I contacted the States of Rare 2 months ago. I don't know of any other places doing this in the state, and that was with the lender's block and the title cert. Accepting the easements, I think we get another legal opinion. This is, yeah.
Tawnytown, I used to be Tawnytown planner, but Tawnytown accepts easements from their city council quarterly. They don't do it at every city council meeting. I kept a record of the lot splits, what we had easements on, for 3 months, and then I would bring it as one full consent agenda to the city council at the quarterly mark, and they would just, that's how Tawnytown did it, in case, who's one are you guys?
Great. Good.
If that is the direction that the board wants us to look in, we can look at that. We can discuss it further with Jay and our city administrator. Everyone and figure out how we go about that, if that's something you guys would like us to proceed with. So at Tawnytown, no, I mean, how it worked with me was we would sign the plat, they would file it, and then when it came around, we just, we said, this is what we approved throughout these 3 months. These are the easements that you guys need to accept. You know what I mean? At that point, the easements are already filed. You're just, this is what you're accepting. This is what we filed on y'all's behalf. Just so.
Yeah, it's not an ordinance. You're just, as a courtesy, that's what I've been explained. It's just a courtesy to the board that you can accept these every 2 weeks. Yeah.
Thank you. You brought some great things to our attention. I would like to be able to get the presentation that we had tonight, your notes, like we ran out of copies, so I want your notes. I think it is something that at some point, probably in the near future, the board really needs to look at. I like a common sense approach as much as anyone doesn't. So if there's things that we need to change to make it easier for all, we need to look at that.
Well, I think the staff, I may be wrong, be corrected, I think the staff enacted the lender cert and the title cert blocks on their own. I don't know why they couldn't just change the rule tomorrow, but that's my simple.
Well, and that may be the case.
Because it seems like we get into these things and then it's always let the board of directors talk about it and then vote on it. We've had so many things that have been decided in the last 8 years behind the scenes. And for whatever reason, we're not here to talk about that, we're moving forward. But okay, now we're moving forward. Let's fix them. I've laid out, I think, 6 of them that I think could be fixed tomorrow. I may be totally wrong and delete them and all that, I get that. But that's just my perspective. Like I said, I think it's fairly unique. And I love this town, I do. But I hate to see, I talked to a surveyor this morning, and he doesn't do any more work in this town because he sends them all to me. All these little lot splits. And I graciously try to do them amongst try to make a living doing the other ones. Because it's expensive. You don't want to pay for it. I pay that money for that. And try to, it's an education thing, try to go through with it. But at the same time, I think that's part of what, you got to dig into the details of the survey, read that thing, don't necessarily get it all with the numbers. Yeah, it was overall positive. The numbers were, but again, I think that's why you've only heard from people that have done the last 2 years. And I know personally guys that have moved on, moved to other towns, and they've worked.
Well, I appreciate your perspective of working with not the big developers, but the neighbors.
Well, it is. It is. It's ministry. One time a lady cried, my helper, we prayed for her, and it was tough. When I showed her where the fence was and where the new line would be, that's sort of what I got into this.
I met with that lady.
Did you? We'll talk after. Good. Anything else?
I appreciate all of your remarks. And as a board of director, I think there's some things that we need to look at, but we do have legal responsibilities, and I just want to make sure that we are fulfilling our legal responsibilities and not overstepping. And I am for simplifying and making sure that the developers are quickly attended to. So I appreciate all these comments.
I was just gonna say, as a realtor, this title certification block, we would love for that to be done. This slows down our process too. Like, I mean, we just had one with Jim that it's It's a silly little lot split thing, and then the title company, they don't have a designated person to sign it. It's gotta go to an attorney somewhere over in Fayetteville. I mean, it's 4 to 5 days for this process, and then the buyer has to pay an additional fee for that. And even the title company says, this is stupid, so.
And if you say we've already eliminated that, you all took care of that already?
I heard a motion, do I have a second?
Okay, I thought you said that already.
Well, no, my personal feeling is they could, since they enacted it by the staff. Again, you can look online in a minute and find out who has the last deed, the name on the last deed, that's all it's approved.
And the title company is pulling that already,
Right.
so they don't feel like, and then they're not authorized usually to sign it. It has to go to like an attorney that has to then look it up. It's just. Do you deal with that in other cities? Do other people?
No, that's why I said the state surveyor,
Okay.
he was sort of surprised. He had not, there's a lot of jurisdictions in the state of Arkansas, and he hadn't seen them, so I yield back my time.
I will say, on the title company sign off, a lot of other cities don't do it, but they do require warranty deeds with the submittals. So if that's something that we're gonna look into, I would highly suggest that we require you to provide a warranty deed with the submittal. Just because I struggled finding warranty deeds previously, when we didn't have that, so, not here, so I don't difference, but just so you guys know that was an issue. Any other questions? Anyone else, oh, Ben Rhodes, senior planning.
I know a little bit about how title service and what happened. So our former city administrator was a city planner, and my understanding is in Colorado, it's common practice to do that. Now, I think partly what the issue is Arkansas is not Colorado. And I think it was intended to protect the city, because when we were accepting these easements, we need to know we have 100% rights to put the water line, the sewer line, all that on these easements. And if there's a cloud on the title or a problem with ownership, the city could be held liable then for really trespassing on someone's property, because the person granting said easement didn't have 100% rights to do that. Now, that said, perhaps getting just a warranty deed would be sufficient to do that, but it was just intended to be an extra layer of protection to the city government, to make sure that there's a seal of approval. We are 100% sure we can accept these easements without any question of ownership or anything like that. I mean, I'd be happy to take it off, but again, that was the whole reason why it was put on in the beginning. So just so you understand the context.
Is replacing the title certification block with the warranty deed just replacing one hassle for another, or is it easier to get the warranty deed?
It's easier to get the warranty deed. They just provide it with their first middle documents. Just previously at my last city, sometimes they wouldn't provide it, and I would spend like an hour searching county websites looking for a warranty deed that they already had in their possession. So I would just recommend that we require that if we're not going to require the title company sign off on it. But there was one specific property that did provide a warranty deed, and then when it came to the title verification process, they did not pass title verification despite having a warranty deed with their name on it. And what was found was there was a small portion of property that they did not own that was on the warranty deed. It was a weird situation. So would you call that? I can't remember what you had called it. But yeah, so there are those occasions, but most other cities do not require title company sign off, as far as I'm aware. That was surprising to me, but that's something we can look into.
Curious, Chairman County, anybody else, what do y'all think about that, figuring it out, thinking about that?
That's fine.
Because you're getting that anyway.
Well, people need to understand, it's not a title insurance policy. Just the signature is the, that's what I'm trying to explain. All it's saying is who has the name on the last deed, is all that you're signing. So it doesn't give you the legal protection you thought anyway. Colorado has different boundary law than Arkansas. So they have a That's what we do. And the city absolutely has a right by law to help organize that plan by law. I get that. But there's so much stuff that's just got to pile on these flat, you can't even fit it all on. It's time to let's get it back to the essential. Developments are a different thing. I get it. Make sure there's drainage and all that stuff. This is, we need to step back, help the city move forward in a good way.
Thank you, Joe, for that comment. Anyone else? You have a question? I'm gonna give you the mic because I don't know if we're picking up any audio, if anyone can hear anything, I'm a little concerned.
I want to thank you all for this evening, everybody here tonight. The previous board administration passed an impact fee for the streets. I want to ask this committee what they have felt from the people from that for the last 2 years. Impact fee.
Yes, thank you. So that street impact fee is based off of, it's essentially an estimated cost of the impact to our streets and infrastructure based on the amount of trips that something is going to generate. So that fee was accepted by the board, but it's been, we've gone back and forth on that process an awful lot. The old system was a lot more convoluted, but what we have now, I think most people are pretty happy with. I've not heard, at least from major developers, I've not heard any pushback on the street impact fees themselves.
So
Sorry, it just works better with one microphone because it messes up when we're students.
So the impact fee, so if I pay the fee, does that stay just for my street, or does that go out to the city for all streets?
Citywide.
Citywide.
You said citywide. Anyone else have any questions that they want to ask? Any final comments or anything before we wrap up our meeting? No? All right. Then this meeting is officially over. Please enjoy some snacks and some drinks before you leave. Please thank your city staff while you